Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jaya Gauramo Prabhupada, Paramahansa, Paravidacharya, O Suteta Sutashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Abhaya Charanada, Bhaktivedanta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Puran Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha, Shiva Siddhi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopakapata Sayam Kunda, Radha Kunda, Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Jagadada Swami Ki Jai, Himanamai Ki Jai, Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai, Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. So we'll read the translation of this poem by Narottam Das Thakur. My dear Lord, please be merciful to me, because who can be more merciful than your Lordship within the three worlds? Your incarnation is just to reclaim the conditioned fallen souls, but I assure you that you will not find a more fallen soul than me. Therefore, my claim is first. My dear Lord Nityananda, you are always joyful in spiritual bliss. Since you always appear very happy, I have come to you because I am most unhappy. Will you kindly put your glance over me? I may also become happy. My dear Advaita Prabhu, husband of Sita, you are so kind. Please be kind to me. If you are kind to me, naturally, Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda will also be kind to me. I pray for the mercy of Sarup Damodar, the six Goswamis, namely Shri Rupa Goswami, Shri Sanatana Goswami, Shri Bhatta Raghunath Goswami, Shri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Shri Jiva Goswami, and Shri Raghunath Dasa Goswami, and Lokanath Prabhu. I, Narottam Das, pray to the merciful Srinivasa Acharya, and I always desire the company of Ramachandra. Okay, so we'll read from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the 6th chapter, which is entitled The Glories of Shri Advaita Acharya. So, Om Gana Tivadanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So we're going to start with text 4. And I guess I'll read the Bengali. Bengali is very sweet. Mahavishnur Jagat Karta Maya Yaksha Jatyadaha Tashavatara Hivayam Advaitacharya Ishvaraha. Translation: Lord Advaitacharya is the incarnation of Mahavishnu, whose main function is to create the cosmic world through the actions of Maya. And text 5. Advaitam Harinadvaitat Acharyam Bhakti Samsanat Bhaktavataram Isham Tam Advaitacharyam Ashrahe. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee, therefore I take shelter of him. So, Advaitacharya Goshai Sakshad Advaitacharya Goshai Sakshad Ishvara Yanhara Mahima Nage Jivera Gochara. Shri Advaitacharya is indeed directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. His glory is beyond the conception of ordinary living beings. So Mahavishnu Shrishti Karena Jagat Acarya Tanravatara Sakshat Advaitacharya. Mahavishnu performs all the functions for the creation of the universes. Shri Advaitacharya is his direct incarnation. Text 8. Ye Purusha Shrishti Stiti Karena Maya Ananta Brahmanda Shrishti Karena Leelaya. That Purusha creates and maintains with his external energy. He creates innumerable universes in his pastimes. Text 9. Ichayananta Murti Karena Prakash Eka Eka Murti Karena Brahmande Pravesh. By his will he manifests himself in unlimited forms in which he enters each and every universe. Say Purusharang Sadvaita Nabi Nahi Kitchubed Sharira Vishesha Tanra Nahika Viched. Sri Advaita Acharya is a plenary part of that Purusha and so is not different from him. Indeed, Sri Advaita Acharya is not separate but is another form of that Purusha. Text 11. Sahaya Karena Tanra Laiha Pradhan Koti Brahmanda Karena Ichaya Nirman. He, Advaita Acharya, helps in the pastimes of the Purusha with whose material energy and by whose will he creates innumerable universes. Text 12. Jagat Mangala Advaita Mangala Gunadam Mangala Charitra Sada Mangala Yanranam. Being a reservoir of all auspicious attributes, Sri Advaita Acharya is all auspicious for the world. His characteristics, activities, and name are always auspicious. And here we have Prabhupada's purport. So purport by his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai. Sri Advaita Prabhu, who is an incarnation of Mahavishnu, is an Acharya or teacher. All his activities and all the other activities of Vishnu are auspicious. Anyone who can view the all-auspiciousness in the pastimes of Lord Vishnu also becomes auspicious simultaneously. Therefore, since Lord Vishnu is the fountainhead of auspiciousness, anyone who is attracted by the devotional service of Lord Vishnu can render the greatest service to human society. Rejected persons of the material world who refuse to understand pure devotional service as the eternal function of the living entities and as actual liberation of the living being from conditioned life become bereft of all devotional service because of their poor fund of knowledge. In the teachings of Advaita Prabhu, there is no question of fruitive activities or impersonal liberation. Bewildered by the spell of the material energy, however, persons who could not understand that Advaita Prabhu is non-different from Vishnu wanted to follow him with their impersonal conceptions. The attempt of Advaita Prabhu to punish them is also auspicious. Lord Vishnu and his activities can bestow all good fortune directly and indirectly. In other words, being favored by Lord Vishnu and being punished by Lord Vishnu are one and the same because all the activities of Vishnu are absolute. According to some, Mangala was another name of Advaita Prabhu. As the causal incarnation, or Lord Vishnu's incarnation for a particular occasion, he is the supply agent or ingredient in material nature. However, he is never to be considered material. All his activities are spiritual. Anyone who hears about and glorifies him becomes glorified himself. For such activities, free one from all kinds of misfortune. One should not invest any material contamination or impersonalism in the Vishnu form. Everyone should try to understand the real identity of Lord Vishnu, for by such knowledge one can attain the highest perfection. So Prabhupada makes here a reference to those who didn't follow Advaita Acharya, and I'd like to read further in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this, of course, is about the followers of Advaita Acharya, the expansions of Advaita Acharya from chapter 12 of the Adi Leela, which deals with this particular subject matter. And we'll start with the first verse in that chapter, and I'm not going to read the Bengali here. So the first verse in this chapter begins as follows. The followers of Advaita Prabhu. In other words, you can have, I'm just going to clarify what the point I'm making, that you can have an absolutely pure devotee or incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you can have those who claim to be followers of him who are actually not followers, so in name only. Like in the Bible, you actually have the statement of Jesus Christ saying, many will say they're, come of me or come in my name, and they are not of me. And actually, Jesus Christ makes the point, those who do the work. Anyone's heard that quote before? I'm just paraphrasing that particular quote, those who actually do what I say. So, and then nowadays, of course, you have the philosophy of many Christians, they say that you just have to believe in the Lord and you'll be saved, and not by works alone. In other words, you don't have to do anything, just believe. Everyone's sinful, everyone's fallen. And sometimes you even hear this nowadays in surrounding or in the periphery of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that everyone's fallen, you just have to believe in Prabhupada. Anyone's heard this before? You just have to believe in Prabhupada. It doesn't matter, you smoke marijuana, but if you glorify Prabhupada, everything's all right. I've seen it. Many cases. It doesn't matter, everyone's fallen. Everyone's a rascal, except for Prabhupada, and he's the one who's initiating everybody nowadays. That's the Ritvik philosophy. But the point is, by taking up Krishna consciousness, you can become unfallen or exalted. Dina hina yatu chilo, harinam udurilo. Anyone takes it, tare sakshay, jagai madai. And the evidence of that is jagai and madai. And many of us, including myself, were more fallen than jagai and madai. So we have first claim for the mercy of the Lord Chaitanya and Advaita Acharya, right? I'm the most fallen. Well, Prabhupada said we're not the most anything. Anyway, so I'm going to read this. The followers of Advaita Acharya were two kinds. Some were real followers and the others were false. Rejecting the false followers, I offer my respectful obeisances to Sri Advaita Acharya's real followers, whose life and soul was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All glories to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all glories to Lord Nityananda, all glories to Sri Advaita Prabhu. All of them are glorious. I offer my respectful obeisances to the all-glorious Advaita Prabhu, who forms the second branch of the eternal Chaitanya tree, and to his followers who form his sub-branches. Sri Advaita Prabhu was the second big branch of the tree. There are many sub-branches, but it is impossible to mention them all. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was also the gardener, and as he poured the water of his mercy on the tree, all the branches and sub-branches grew day by day. The fruits of love of Godhead that grew on those branches of the Chaitanya tree were so large that they flooded the entire world with love of Krishna. As the trunk and branches were watered, the branches and sub-branches spread lavishly, and the tree grew full with fruits and flowers. At first, all the followers of Advaita Acharya shared a single opinion, but later they followed two different opinions as ordained by providence. And here there's a lengthy purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. I think it's important for us to read this purport because it relates not only to Advaita Acharya's not only followers but his sons. As we mentioned last night, Advaita Acharya had 6 sons, and 3 of them he considered to be his sons. And 3 of them he said, they're not my sons anymore, or they never were their sons. Anyway, he rejected them as his sons, which is interesting. Because son, of course, sometimes we can take son to mean follower, disciple. And so disciple, the word disciple literally means one who, shashtatu, actually, disciplined. One who is actually disciplined by the spiritual master. One who actually follows the order of the spiritual master. Otherwise, not a disciple. To say, I'm a disciple, let's say if I say I'm a disciple of Prabhupada, I'm not following him, but I'm a disciple. You're not a disciple. Yes, you were initiated by Prabhupada. That's true. There was a ceremony. You were initiated. But you're not a disciple. Because a disciple means discipline, right? Shashtatu. So one could say, I'm a disciple of Prabhupada. Of course, someone may be struggling. That's all right. And they can still say they're a disciple. I'm trying my best to follow Prabhupada's instructions. But if you make up an excuse that, actually you can't follow Prabhupada's instructions, not practical in this day and age, it's all right to do whatever, then you're not a disciple. Or if you're deliberately doing something that is in disobedience to Srila Prabhupada. The words Daiva Karana indicate that by the dint of providence or by God's will, the followers of Sri Advaita Acharya divided into two parties. Such disagreement amongst the disciples of one Acharya is also found amongst the members of the Gaudiya Math in the beginning during the presence of Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya, Ostatera Satashi Shimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. All the disciples worked in agreement, but just after his disappearance they disagreed. One party strictly followed the instructions of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, but another party created their own concoction about executing his desires. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, at the time of his departure, requested all his disciples to form a governing body and conduct missionary activities cooperatively. He did not instruct a particular man to become the next Acharya, but just after his passing away, his leading secretaries made plans without authority to occupy the post of Acharya, and they split into two factions over who the next Acharya would be. Consequently, both factions were asara, or useless, because they had no authority, having disobeyed the order of the spiritual master. Despite the spiritual master's order to form a governing body and execute the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math, the two unauthorized factions began litigation that is still going on after 40 years with no decision. Therefore, we do not belong to any faction, but because the two parties busy dividing the material assets of the Gaudiya Math institution stopped the preaching work, we took up the mission of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhakti Vinod Thakur to preach the cult of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world, under the protection of all the predecessor acharyas. And we find that our humble attempt has been successful. We follow the principles especially explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita verse, Vyavasayatmaka Buddhir Ekeha Kurunandana. According to this instruction of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it is the duty of a disciple to follow strictly the orders of his spiritual master. The secret of success and advancement in spiritual life is the firm faith of the disciple in the orders of his spiritual master. The Vedas confirm this. Yasha Devi Paralaktir Yata Devi Tata Guru Dashaite Katita Yarta Prakashante Mahatmana. To one who has staunch faith in the words of the spiritual master and the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the secret of success in Vedic knowledge is revealed. The Krishna consciousness movement is being propagated according to this principle, and therefore our preaching work is going on successfully, in spite of the many impediments offered by antagonistic demons, because we are getting positive help from our previous acharyas. One must judge every action by its result. The members of the self-appointed acharyas party who occupied the property of the Gaudiya Math are satisfied, but they could make no progress in preaching. Therefore, by the result of their actions, one should know that they are asara or useless. Whereas the success of the ISKCON party, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which strictly follows Guru and Gauranga, is increasing daily all over the world. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted to print as many books as possible and distribute them all over the world. We have tried our best in this connection, and we are getting results beyond our expectations. I'll continue reading. Some of the disciples strictly accepted the orders of the Acharya, and others deviated independently, concocting their own opinions under the spell of Daivi Maya. Purport. This verse describes the beginning of a schism. When disciples do not stick to the principle of accepting the order of their spiritual master, immediately there are two opinions. Any opinion different from the opinion of the spiritual master is useless. One cannot infiltrate maturely concocted ideas into spiritual advancement. That is deviation. There is no scope for adjusting spiritual advancement to material ideas. The order of the spiritual master is the active principle in spiritual life. Anyone who disobeys the order of the spiritual master immediately becomes useless. Here's the opinion of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Persons who strictly follow the orders of the spiritual master are useful in executing the will of the Supreme, whereas persons who deviate from the strict order of the spiritual master are useless. There's no need to name those who are useless. I have mentioned them only to distinguish them from the useful devotees. Paddy is mixed with straw at first, and one must fan it to separate the paddy from the straw. I think we don't need to get more into these details. Let me just continue reading the next verse. A big branch of Advaita Acharya was Achyutananda, his son. From the beginning of his life, he engaged in the service at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. So this is the story I told last night. When Achyutananda heard from his father that Keshava Bharati was the spiritual master of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was very unhappy. He told his father, "Your instruction that Keshava Bharati is the spiritual master of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will spoil the entire country." He was chastising his father because he felt his father represented Abhasidanta. And this shows what a real father... Of course, there was a test. It's not that Advaita Acharya would actually present an Abhasidanta. So he continued, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the spiritual master of the 14 worlds, but you say that someone else is his spiritual master. This is not supported by any revealed scripture. When Advaita Acharya heard this statement from his 5-year-old son, Achyutananda, he felt great satisfaction because of his conclusive judgment. So now we're going to read a comment on Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary. So commenting on verses 13 through 17, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur gives an extensive description of the descendants of Advaita Acharya. The Chaitanya Bhagavat Antya Khanda, chapter 1, states that Achyutananda was the eldest son of Advaita Acharya. The Sanskrit book Advaita Charita states Advaita Acharya had 3 sons named Achyuta, Krishna Mishra, and Gopal Das, all born of the womb of his wife Sita Devi, who were devotees of Lord Chaitanya. Advaita Acharya also had 3 more sons whose names were Balaram, Swarupa, and Jagadish. Thus there were 6 sons of Advaita Acharya. Among the 6 sons, 3 were strict followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and of these 3, Achyutananda was the eldest. Advaita Acharya married in the beginning of the 15th century Shakabda, late 15th century AD, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted to visit the village of Ramakeli while going from Jagannath Puri to Vrindavan during the Shakabda years 1433 and 1434, that's AD 1512 and 1513. Achyutananda was only 5 years old. The Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anchakanda, 4th chapter, describes Achyutananda at that time as Panchavarsha Vayasa Madhura Digambara, only 5 years old and standing naked. Actually, there's sages in India that are called Digambaras. They're called naked sages. They run around naked. Therefore, it is to be concluded that Achyutananda was born sometime in the year 1428, that's AD 1507. Before the birth of Achyutananda, Advaita Prabhu's wife Sita Devi came to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at his birth. Thus, it is not impossible that she had 3 other sons by Advaita within the 21 years between 1407 and 1428 Shakabda, that's AD 1486 to 1507. In an unauthorized book of the name Sita Dvaita Charita, published in Bengali in the unauthorized newspaper Nityananda Dayani in 1792 Shakabda, that's 1871, it is mentioned that Achyutananda was a class friend of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It could not be. According to Chaitanya Bhagavat, this statement is not at all valid. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the renounced order of sannyas, he came to the house of Advaita Prabhu at Shantipur in the year 1431 Shakabda AD 1510. At that time, as stated in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, Anshakanda, chapter 1, Achyutananda was only 3 years old. In other words, I said it's interesting because, in other words, Advaita Acharya had his sons when he was quite old. I mean, he was old enough to be the grandfather of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and yet...
He was about 60, right?
He was 60.
60.
When Lord Chaitanya appeared.
Yeah, it was 60 when Lord Chaitanya appeared. And so that means that, he was in his 70s when Achyutananda was born. But he also stayed in this world to 125, as mentioned in his biography. So, the Chaitanya Bhagavat further states that the naked child, the son of Advaita Prabhu, immediately came. Whoops. It skipped here. Immediately came and fell down at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The Lord immediately took him on his lap. Although he was not very clean, having dust all over his body, Lord Chaitanya said, "My dear Achyuta, Advaita Acharya is my father, and thus we are brothers." It's an interesting relationship. Before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited his spiritual forms during his residence at Navadvip, he asked Sri Ram Pandit Srivas Thakur's brother to go to Shantipur and bring back Advaita Acharya. Achyutananda joined his father at that time. It is said, Advaitera Tanya Achyutananda Nam Panama Balaka Seho Kande Aviram. Achyutananda also joined in crying in transcendental bliss. Again, when Lord Chaitanya beat Advaita Acharya for explaining the Srimad Bhagavatam from a personalist viewpoint opposed to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, and I didn't tell that story last night, I can tell it right now. What happened is that Advaita Acharya wanted to be beaten by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he was very much upset that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was respecting him like his father or grandfather or a spiritual master, and he understood that he was subservient to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in an ontological sense, according to his identity. So in order to evoke the anger of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he began to preach this Yoga Vasishta philosophy, which is sort of an impersonal philosophy. And Lord Chaitanya, when he heard that, he got so upset, he called for Lord Nityananda, and he said to Lord Nityananda, "Let's go to see Advaita Acharya." So on the way to see Advaita Acharya, there's a funny story that they took prasadam in the house of a Shakta, who was like a household sannyasi. And when they were taking prasadam there, the Shakta offered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu happiness at the end of the meal. The happiness happened to be booze or liquor or beer or something like that, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't really know what that word meant. But Lord Nityananda, being older, understood what that word meant. And Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda both jumped into the Ganges at that particular point and swam all the way to Shantipur. And so anyway, so when they reached Shantipur, one of the first things that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, he said, where is this Advaita Acharya? He basically pulled him and started pummeling him with his fists. And Sita Devi, Advaita Acharya's wife, said, "You're going to kill the old man." And then he said, "That's all right, he's preaching this bogus philosophy." And Advaita Acharya basically started dancing, expressing ecstasy. Now I've achieved what I wanted. I got chastised by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Lord Chaitanya understood it was a mistake. So that's the background of this particular story. Again, when Lord Chaitanya beat Advaita Acharya for explaining Srimad Bhagavatam from a personalistic viewpoint opposed to the principles of Bhakti Yoga, Achyutananda was also present. So he saw his father being abused. Therefore, all of these incidents must have occurred only 2 or 3 years before Lord Chaitanya accepted the sannyasa order. In the Chaitanya Bhagavat Anchakanda, chapter 1, it is stated that Achyutananda, the son of Advaita Acharya, offered his obeisance to the Lord. Therefore, it be concluded that from the very beginning of his life, Achyutananda was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's no information that Achyutananda ever got married, but he is described as the biggest branch of the Advaita Acharya family. From a book named Sakha Nirnayamrita, Yamrita, it is understood that Achyutananda was a disciple of Gadadhar, and that he took shelter of Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri and engaged in devotional service. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 10, states that Achyutananda, the son of Advaitacharya, lived in Jagannath Puri, taking shelter of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Gadadhar Pandit, in the last years of his life, also lived with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Jagannath Puri. There is no doubt, therefore, that Achyutananda was a disciple of Pandit Gadadhar. In the accounts of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's dancing in front of the car during the Rath Yatra festival, Achyutananda's name is to be found many times. It is stated that the party of Advaita Charya from Shantipur, in the party, Achyutananda was dancing and others were singing. At that time, the boy was only 6 years old. Wow. The Gauragana Dashdipika, compiled by Shri Kavi Karnapur, has described Achyutananda as a disciple of Gadadhar Pandit and a great and dear devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. According to the opinion of some, he was an incarnation of Kartikeya, the son of Lord Shiva. And according to others, he was formerly the gopi named Achyuta. He could be both, actually. The Gauragana Dashdipika has supported both these opinions. Another book, Narottam Vilas, compiled by Sri Narahari Das, mentions Achyutananda's presence during the festival at Keturi. That's the festival, of course, that Narottama Das Thakur conducted. In Gaur Purnima festival, in which there were 6 deities installed, and during that festival there was a kirtan, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and all of his associates appeared dancing. And as soon as Narottama Das's kirtan ended, they disappeared. According to Narahari Das, during the last days of his life, Achyutananda stayed in the house of Shantipur, but during the presence of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he lived at Jagannath Puri with Gadadhar Pandit. Of the 6 sons of Advaitacharya, 3, Achyutananda, Krishna Mishra, and Gopal, lived faithfully in the service of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Since Achyutananda did not accept a wife, he had no issue. The second son of Advaitacharya, Krishna Mishra, had 2 sons, Raghunath Chakravarti and Dola Govinda. The descendants of Raghunath still live in Shantipur in the neighborhoods of Madan Gopal Pada, Ganakara, Mrijapura, and Kumara Kali. Dola Govinda had 3 sons, namely Chanda, Kandarpa, and Gopinath. The descendants of Kandarpa live in Malda in the village Jikapali. Gopinath had 3 sons, Shri Ballava, Pranaballava, and Keshava. The descendants of Shri Ballava live in the villages known as Mashiyadhara, Mashiyadhara, which is another name of that same village, Damokadiya, and Chandipura. There is a genealogical table for the family of Shri Ballava. Anyway, so he gives Prabhupada gives all the genealogical table here. So, okay, we got 3 more minutes. I'll just read a few more verses. Krishna Mishra was the son of Advaitacharya. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always sat in his heart. Shri Gopal was another son of Shri Advaitacharya Prabhu. Now just hear about his characteristics. Purport. Shri Gopal was one of the 3 devoted sons of Advaitacharya, as described in the Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 12, text 143 through 149. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally cleansed the Gundicha Mandira in Jagannath Puri, Gopal danced in front of the Lord with great love and happiness. And Prabhupada explains the Gundicha Gundicha Mandir is situated in Jagannath Puri, and every year Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra come there from the Jagannath temple to stay for 8 days. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived at Jagannath Puri, every year he personally cleansed this temple with his principal devotees. The Gundicha Marjana chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Leela 12, describes this vividly. While Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Advaitacharya chanted the Hare Krishna mantra dance, there were various ecstatic symptoms in their bodies, and their minds were very pleased. While all of them danced, Gopal, dancing and dancing, I mentioned this pastime last night, fainted and fell to the ground unconscious. Advaitacharya Prabhu became very unhappy. Taking his son on his lap, he began to chant in the Shringa mantra for his protection. Advaitacharya chanted various mantras, but Gopal did not come to consciousness. Thus all the Vaishnavas present cried in sorrow at his plight. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then put his hand on the chest of Gopal and told him, "My dear Gopal, get up and chant the holy name of the Lord." When he heard this sound and felt the touch of the Lord, Gopal immediately got up, and all the Vaishnavas chanted the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in jubilation. The other sons of Advaita Acharya were Sri Balaram, Swarup, and Jagadish. Actually, Prabhupada said they were smartas or Mayavadis and were rejected by Vaishnava society. Sometimes Mayavadis pose themselves as Vaishnavas or worshippers of Lord Vishnu, but actually they do not believe in Lord Vishnu as the supreme personality Godhead, for they consider demigods like Lord Shiva, Durga, the sun god, and Ganesh equal to him. They are generally known as Panchopashaka Smartas, and one should not count them among the Vaishnavas. And so, like if you go around Vrindavan and other places, you'll see the Panchamukha Hanuman, which is part of this misunderstanding. And they actually portray Hanuman. One face is like Lord Vishnu, not Lord Vishnu. One face is like Varaha, isn't it? Nrsimha. I mean, it's just like complete impersonalism. So unfortunately, most of the people in India, although they may worship Krishna and go to Janmashtami, if you go right underneath the surface, they're not actually theists. They believe in many gods. Yastu Narayanam Devam Brahma Rudradi Daivata Samit Vainava Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavet Rubam. The statement is, if one thinks that the demigods like Lord Shiva or Rama are equal to or independent, the holy name of Lord Vishnu, they're Prashandis or atheists. So most people are Prashandis. I mean in America too. It's not just a criticism of people in India. It's just like everybody, they go to the Hindu center and they say, the gods. Let's go.